was born, my family lived.
Talk shoes. Recorded live.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Program, the service of the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website. My name is William Hayashi. I will be your host tonight, and sitting with us is Cece, or Charles, Ekeke, and he's an author, like I am.
How you doing?
He's out in, hi. You're out in L.A. Wait, I didn't even ask. Are you in L.A. now?
Yes, I am, yes.
Okay, and you actually, how long have you lived there?
I've lived in L.A. since 1990.
Yeah.
So I've been here
What
for
brought
most
you out
of
there?
my life.
Yeah.
I was moved out here. I didn't have a choice. I was 10. I had to go.
Yeah, I hate it when the marshals come and tell me I got to go someplace else, too. Anyway, and where did you grow up?
Most of my life I was in L.A., but I've lived in the South and I've lived in the Midwest. Probably the second longest place was I grew up like 8 years in St. Louis. In Creve Coeur and Cooperstown.
Yeah, that would be kind of an exciting place to be living right now, and not necessarily in the best way.
Yeah, pretty much. You hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah, and as I said, you are a writer, and for those people who are online, Jarvis will put up the links, and your current property. Well, let's talk about your early life. I mean, you said you lived most of your life in L.A.
Mm-hmm.
I take it your family moved there.
Yeah, pretty much. My mom and my two older sisters, basically, and we moved. Essentially, we lived in St. Louis, and before that, my family's been all over the place, and it's mainly because my dad was in medical school and he was doing his residency in different parts of the country. So initially, before I was born, my family lived in San Bernardino County, and then I was born actually outside of D.C. in Rockville, Maryland. And from there, after bouncing around Ohio a bit, then we came to St. Louis and was there for about 8 years. And that's pretty much a lot of where I really started to gravitate towards science fiction and fantasy and just speculative fiction as a whole. That's where it started because, of course, Star Wars, of course. And,
sure.
Exactly. Saturday morning cartoons, those are great. They don't have those anymore now, but, Saturday morning cartoons when they're at the peak. I'd sneak those in right before church. And also just stuff like just all the great cartoons and whatnot in the movies that were in the 80s and whatnot. Those were just big inspirations and kind of really sparked my imagination.
Yeah. Did you do any writing earlier on, when you were younger, or were you just kind of, that was kind of like where you focused your entertainment and really kind of, where your major interests started to lie?
Here's the interesting thing is that I initially, when I was a kid, and up until about up through high school, I was interested in the stories, but I was not interested in writing. I actually used to draw a lot. I used to sketch a lot. That's where my creativity was kind of going to when I was younger. I'd always I'd get inspired by certain characters, and I'd kind of draw something that inspired me from them. I could never really draw someone else's characters. Like, let's say, if it was like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, I could never actually draw the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. I never had interest in that, but I always would maybe, okay, this character inspired me, maybe some type of ninja-like character. And it was when I was younger, doing the sketching, I initially wanted to be a comic book artist. That's where my interest really lies. I wanted to just sketch characters, and I wanted to create my own characters. So writing actually I didn't really have the epiphany to write until I was in college. It was my sophomore year when I was just I have to write these ideas down, because at that point I didn't really think, I was okay, I don't really think I have the talent to become a comic artist, but I still want to do something with these ideas. And at that point, there was not really, the independent scene was still very underground for comics. I mean, it existed, but if you wanted to get into the big, DC, Marvel, or, the distant third, Dark Horse, you'd kind of sketch their ideas, and then even if you came up with your own ideas, basically you wouldn't own them anymore. Any idea you came up with would be theirs, and I was just like, I didn't like that at all. So for the longest time, I kind of had a bit of limbo, like, okay, I still like sketching, I still like coming up with these creative characters, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do with them. And then it was just kind of like the end of my sophomore year, I was just going through some old sketches, and I just kind of got hit with this epiphany. I was just like, I got to write these down.
Because you had the stories in your head already.
Yeah, well, I had a preliminary story, and I had the prototypes for Star Brigade actually by that point. And so it was just kind of at that point, I had some stories. I wanted to do something with these characters, and it was just then that I was like, okay, I could write a book. And that's where that came from. And I already was fascinated by the comic books. Comic books was kind of where that, aside from just reading books here and there, but comic books like X-Men, Avengers, even, Image Comics way back when, I drew a lot of inspirations when I initially started coming up with Star Brigade in the beginning, like actually writing down the stories and turning them into a book.
Now, did any of your art ever get out? Did you ever manage to do any of the comics and maybe show them around or have other people see them or even published?
No, I definitely wouldn't want that. My artwork was not that great. Now that I look back, I'm like, whoa, that wasn't good. I did pretty much it wasn't. But I did actually create a comic book, like a comic book or two, maybe like years ago when I was in middle school, and it probably will never see the light of day.
Well, even though you don't show it to anybody, you obviously know that that's where your inspiration came, and that's kind of like where the whole thing started out.
Yeah.
So, okay, you sound, well, obviously you sound younger than me because I don't think anybody is older than me in the universe. But, about how old were you when you kind of galvanized the idea to put together, and for people who don't know, it's Star Brigade. I actually put up a link to your Goodreads profile.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's and for people who want to go look for you, actually in Goodreads, look for C.C.EKEKE, and that's how you get to his name. That's how you find his profile. So here you are. You did that when you were in middle school. You kind of, what did you do? Get away from it and then come back to the idea, or was it always percolating around in the back of your head?
It was always percolating around in the back of my head. I think even like another big inspiration for the book came from not just Star Wars way back when, but also Star Trek, like Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, especially Deep Space Nine, particularly because when I was crafting, because I think by the time before I left high school, I'd come up with the general idea for Star Brigade, and I'd come up with, say, like what I wanted the characters, most of the main characters to be. And I think one of the big characters that went through a huge change was the lead character in the book. Because initially when I was, again, before I was even writing the book, I was actually sketching him out as to what I wanted him to look like. Like what I saw in my head, here's what I wanted him to look like. And I remember initially I had no problem with how he looked before. But then I think it was just, as I was getting older, I was just like, you know what? This looks like every single lead or comic book field team leader that I'd seen or experienced. Let me diversify it. And so that was when, because initially the character used to be, he was Caucasian. And so then I actually changed him to African because I was just like, this team needs a little diversity, at least amongst the human characters. So that was kind of, for me, because a lot of things for me, when I was growing up, I grew up in predominantly white neighborhoods, predominantly white schools. And for me, it was kind of just normal. I just, I kind of accepted it at the time. I knew that my family, a lot of times, given that my parents are not from this country, both my parents were born and raised in Nigeria, there's a lot of things about certain, African-American culture that I couldn't really relate to because it's not how I was brought up. So there are just certain things I just kind of accepted, like I'm a minority, I get it. But it was kind of at that point where I was kind of like, you know what, I need to change this. This needs to be different. And that's when I changed the character and made him of African descent.
Okay, so give us kind of like the thumbnail sketch of the Star Brigade universe. You know, what's the kind of like the just the general universe, and then, you know, which way does the story go? You know, how you conceived of the whole idea.
Okay. Well, basically, the story is kind of almost like an alternate history of the current history that we live in right now. It takes place in the 25th century, early 25th century, and it deals with mainly a star-spanning government that humans are part of. And there's multiple different races, and it's not the only star-spanning government. There's other big, I call them hyperpowers, since, you know, hyperspace, they have access to hyperspace. And the Star Brigade would be the equivalent of, say, like the Delta Force or the Green Berets. They're like a spec ops team. And basically they deal with characters. A lot of them have special abilities, so there's kind of a bit of an X-Men type to it, but they're militarized. They're part of the spec ops teams, and they deal with extraordinary threats, whether it be people with other special abilities or just they deal with counterterrorism. And that's kind of where that comes from. You know, I made sure when I was writing it that people didn't think that they were the only peacekeeping force in this government. I'm like, no, they're kind of just an arm of a larger armed forces. And it focuses on this team. This team has basically gone through, when we see them in the book, this team is basically not in the best straits. It's kind of almost close to getting decommissioned because there's been just a string of failed missions that has happened. So basically, the last-ditch effort is they're bringing back this kind of war hero, the main character, to kind of see if they can turn it around. See if, hey, there's one last thing that we can try. And so it's him kind of rebuilding the team from scratch and starting with, okay, there's one combat team. Let's see what we can do with it. And right around that same time, there is this kind of religious fanatic terrorist who is coming back, and everyone thought this guy was dead. His name is Maelstrom, and he deals with, and his storyline, the best way to kind of relate it without getting too into the weeds, it's very akin to what kind of happened with the Native Americans, and at the same time, what happened with Japanese Americans during World War II, being thrown in the internment camps in the United States, where the acts of a dozen or a fringe group condemned this entire species. And basically, he's kind of an extreme arm who they're not going to take that treatment anymore. So basically, in one vein, the villain of the piece, he has a point to his anger, but he's just going about it by very, very extreme fanatical means. And so basically, what happens is the Star Brigade has to stop him. The Star Brigade actually, they weren't initially tasked with it. They just happened to be pulled into this, and they ended up being the most equipped to stop him since they've given their abilities and given that this fanatical terrorist has abilities as well.
So let's go back a little bit. You had the characters, you had the story, you know, for quite some time, you know, as you were growing up. You know, what do you think? You know, if you could think back, what was the inspiration? Was it the comics that you saw and the cartoons? Excuse me. And then you kind of translated that into actual creation of your universe, or you know what? Because it's always interesting when someone starts out with an idea that young, and because so many kids, they lose that. You know, they don't execute. They don't go any further with it. You know, and it could be like, you know, you and me. We don't draw, but we're storytellers. You know, for me, you know, I couldn't do a comic book because you know, how tacky is it for the superhero to only have 3 fingers on one hand? That's just not going to fly. So, you know, I think Clint Eastwood said it best. A man's got to know his limitations. You know. But when you're inspired like that in your teens and you actually get to follow through, you know, what inspired you to get to where you are? Because that's not an easy place to get. I mean, you see it, you have it in your mind, but then to actually keep it that long and manifest it without being, an artist in terms of drawing. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think what it was for me was, I remember, kind of like I told you, comics was a big inspiration. I think just for some reason I was just able to. Here's the interesting thing about it. I think one of the reasons why I was able to hold on to the idea for so long is because it mutated and changed so many times. Because Star Brigade wasn't the first idea I had. It was just like there was mutations of different teams, superhero teams that I had in my head. And then eventually, like, as I got older and as I was like, okay, that idea isn't working anymore, I'm not interested anymore, it eventually became the Star Brigade when I was like a teenager. So it's just like there was like one different team. There's like maybe a prototype of Star Brigade, but it wasn't quite Star Brigade. And then by the time I became a teen, based on different influences, maybe I saw something cool on like Babylon 5, or, I was reading this cool new comic, then it became like Star Brigade. Mm-hmm. That's when the whole thing was fake. Like when I made the characters kind of like they had special abilities, that was definitely a huge X-Men inspiration. When I made the Star Brigade team, they weren't just kind of like, hey, we're just a typical superhero team in the future. I made them more kind of a military unit. That inspiration definitely was, I'd say, Babylon 5 and probably Star Trek.
Yeah.
So it just
you were truly, and I don't mean this in any bad way, but you were truly a child of that television sci-fi generation.
Yeah.
That first generation, because we had the Outer Limits in black and white. Okay, that was early '60s. We had, but I think, like you said, the doorbuster was Star Trek.
Yes, it was.
And then maybe shortly after that, Battlestar Galactica. And when we talk about epic sci-fi television,
space opera too.
Yeah, and even some of the, I don't know if people. Was it Space Angel? Was there a guy called Space? Yeah, for those people who were in Chicago, I know that we had a cartoon here called Clutch Cargo with his pal Spinner and Paddlefoot, and what it was the cartoons, but they had the real lips that moved, like real person's lips inserted in the cartoon. So
oh my goodness.
It was kind of freaky, and excuse me, everybody, for using the word, but my mother called them the animated assholes because it looked like a talking penis in the middle of somebody's face. And
that's awesome.
But we got to see that sort of thing, and it's obviously it had a huge effect on our generation. And when I say our generation, I mean, kind of early me and later you, just because of how things happen. And then even there was other television that had a little bit of we had the cartoons, we had Johnny Quest, we had and so what you did was you took an amalgam of ideas and created your own universe. Because first of all, the team thing is great. Obviously as a writer, when you have a team, that opens up a lot more possibilities for things to happen, for different subplots, for not having writing fatigue or viewing fatigue or reading fatigue about reading the same character all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think one of the reasons why Deep Space Nine resonated with more fans than either Voyager, Star Trek, or even the Next Generation is because it was almost completely character-driven. Yes, there was adventure, but you have people out there who love Cisco Kodo. You have people out there, for whatever reason, who are so invested in these characters, and I believe it was because the way it was written and the way it was conceived, to be an ensemble cast with that deep, abiding story plot lines, the abiding story plot lines of the people there. So, if you're borrowing from those kind of ideas in order to create to make a creative universe, they are enduring strategies. And
you hit the nail on the head there. You really did, because that was always my thing. Is that don't get me wrong, there are some books where if it is focused on one character, if the author is good enough, they can make it compelling. Like, for instance, I'd say one of the biggest inspirations when I initially started writing was when I knew I wanted to write and I started doing it. One of the biggest inspirations was Harry Potter. You know, I remember the first Harry Potter book I read, and she made it compelling for like 7 books with this main character, and it's all like, with the exception of maybe a chapter or two in some of the books, the entire POV is on this one kid wizard. But at the same time, for me, I would get bored just writing one character and one POV. So that's one of the reasons why I made it, where it's like there's multiple POVs in this book. So you're seeing the story from someone else's perspective, and it just kind of keeps it interesting. It also shows the breadth and the scope of, okay, this is a pretty big universe. It's not just like one thing and you're seeing it through one guy's vision. You're seeing multiple POVs, and what one person might see, hey, this is how I feel about something. Another person, this is how I feel about something. And it's completely different, but they're not necessarily wrong, but they can be very different.
Well, sure. People, obviously, different people can look at the exact same thing and, first of all, see it through different eyes.
Exactly.
And also, when they act, they have different motivations because they have, different perspectives.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was thinking, first of all, how long has this been out?
This edition of the book has been out for about 10 months. But this is a re-release of a book that I released actually in late 2005, early 2006. What I wanted to do was, when I first released it, it was the first time, like, I hadn't really released a book before. I decided to do it print on demand. There's a lot I didn't know back then, and the universe wasn't as well fleshed out as it is now. And given the ebook revolution, I remember there was this friend of mine like a couple of years ago who was just like, hey, well, why don't you try self-publishing on ebooks? And I'd never even really considered that at that point. So what I ended up doing is I went back and I just rewrote a lot of the book. I trimmed it down a lot, and I was able to mesh the backstory. There's certain backstory that I'd put in the early edition in its own chapter, and I was able to mesh it in much better into the overall present-day story. And I figured with ebooks, I'm like, you know what, that would probably be a better avenue because I want to move forward with this as a series, but I wanted to give it another chance to shine because I was really confident about the story, and I was like, this is a fairly good story. Granted, I am very biased, but this is a fairly good story, and I felt that it deserved a chance to shine, at least in the ebook form.
Well, you have a lot more confidence than I do. I didn't know I had written any kind of good book until like 8 months after it'd been on available. Because, well, come on. And if we're to be brutally frank, when you give your work to a friend, if they're a good friend, they don't want to hurt your feelings. And if it's not good, that's a tough road to hoe. How do you tell your friend you really need you got to you didn't publish this already, did you? If you ever give something to somebody and that's what they say, then you know you're in trouble.
Yeah.
This isn't out on. But that's good that you had the confidence of your conviction because most writers are a little more insecure because it's very difficult to divorce criticism of your writing from your worth as a human being. People have a tough time with that.
You're right. You're totally right about that. There have been some times that when there have been some negative reviews I've gotten, and of course you take it personally because this is your baby. And even when you release it to the world, you're worried. Okay, what are people thinking? Even as much as I love my story, you're still worried. That insecurity is still there. That concern, that fear is still there, understandably.
You're absolutely right. When I got my first 1-star review, I said bad words. Because it was like, what the, I did too. I totally did too. And the funny thing is, on one vein, I think it's good to get the bad reviews because, one, it reminds you, okay, it keeps you from getting too high off the fumes of your own awesomeness. I think that's very important to keep yourself grounded because as a writer, you should always seek to improve. And sometimes, the people who are kind of not too nasty in their reviews, see what it is they didn't like. See what it is that they had a problem with that prevented you from getting a better review.
But going back to what we were talking about kind of, liking my work and being confident, I think one of the important things that I saw, I remember reading this. It was watching, I'm going to go completely geek for a second. I was watching the appendix of the extended edition of Fellowship of the Ring. And I don't know if you've ever watched those. Those are amazing because it really delves into how J.R.R. Tolkien was crafting and developing the whole Lord of the Rings universe. And I remember the important thing they said about him when he was creating the books. He wanted to create and write books that he would like to read.
Sure.
And that's kind of what I'm doing with Star Brigade and anything that I write is that at the end of the day, if I don't want to read it, why am I writing it? So that's my whole thing with Star Brigade. And I'm writing something that obviously I want other people to like it. That's important. But if I don't like it as a story, then I shouldn't be writing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, by and large, that is true. When you look at your own work, there should be a pride of ownership. Whether you're confident that what you've done is the best that you could do or not.
Yeah.
And sometimes, exactly what you said, you do have to listen to critique. And I will say this, in my experience in the last 10 years, most writers are not looking for an honest critique. Most writers are looking for a cheerleader.
Yes.
Okay. And when you cautiously say, perhaps something here, something there, they will run away because that's not what they want to hear. They just want you to tell them how great they are. And I don't think that path is to any kind of improvement.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. One of the things that I've been trying to do, particularly with getting editors, is get somebody who's got no skin in the game that you have no personal attachment to. It's good to have friends look at it, but I think if you want the serious edits, always have somebody who you completely do not have any emotional attachment to. Maybe even somebody you haven't even met, because that's better than having a friend do your edits or you kind of maybe doing your edits. Because you're so right about sometimes some people, if you say anything about their books, they they don't want to hear it. And that's very dangerous. That's a very dangerous path to go down. Sometimes even when, the person gives me critique, it's just you kind of just cringe, you kind of recoil away from the critique, but it's good to see that because there might be something. There's usually something that, hey, I wrote that, it worked for me, and then it's wait a minute, when somebody else is looking at it and you see why they didn't like it. Oh, that kind of makes sense.
Well, my first book I wrote in, the people I was fearful of were like the people, the Tom Clancy types, who know so much detail about military or that kind of drama. And then I said, oh man, the last thing I need is to have somebody really pull, it's like, what, he didn't know that gravity actually pulled stuff to the center of the earth, or something as equally ludicrous for me to have overlooked. And so I spent so much time doing research, and I think a little too much of that leaked in the book. So there's also having that light touch and being able to apply the light touch. Obviously, anybody who edits their own work is probably not going to do a very good job.
Not as much.
That's like they said. What's that saying? A man who has himself for a lawyer has a fool for a client.
I've never heard that, but I like that.
Yeah, and so if you, first of all, when you read your own work, your brain is going to supply whatever you think it's supposed to be there.
Exactly. You're going to skim over the edits. Yeah, you're going to skim over the errors. Yeah.
And you're going to miss it. You're going to miss it. So, and the other thing is, I found it very, very instructive. I had two sets of people helping me with the construction. One set were just readers. I just gave it to readers. Here, read the manuscript and see if you like it. If you see anything, let me know. And then the others were the it's and it's people,
Okay.
The people who went through and found all the edits and found the typos, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Oh, you're missing a quote here or something like that. And so having both classes of people help me out, I has turned out well. It has turned out really well. Now, for you, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And you're right, exactly. What I've been starting to do is at least have a couple rounds of edits with, okay, these people are definitely a copy editor, and then you have an actual editor. And then one thing I'm starting to actually employ, I employed it actually with my, when I was releasing this book, is beta readers, like you said, people who are just like, okay, let them kind of read it, give their thoughts. It's kind of like a proofread, if you will. Not full-on copy edit, not full-on edit, but it's just they're reading the book. Does it make sense? Does it work for you? Does it flow well? Are the characters and the plot engaging?
Right.
That kind of, that preliminary stuff. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the nuts and bolts, and pretty much all of that, writers know about, or they should know about. And if they don't know about it, then they, okay, fine, you're getting a great awakening on this show. Now go to school, would you? But the other part, okay, you get the book out. Excuse me. You kind of do a second edition. Let's talk a little bit. Let's talk about the nuts and bolts of being a self. And I'm guessing, did you self-publish this guy?
I did.
Okay, so as a self-published author, you don't have the marketing of Penguin behind you.
Nope.
You don't have somebody running ads. You don't have end caps at Barnes and Noble. How did you put together your marketing campaign as an independent? And I'm going to guess you're not independently wealthy, correct?
Not so much. Not yet, hopefully.
Yeah, but I'm being realistic. Okay, so you're a writer. You're not a rich guy who can just put in what I want to do. I want to do a half-page ad or a full-page ad in the New York Times book section, and then I went and looked editorially what that's going to cost. That's like $20,000.
Yeah.
But and so obviously I don't have that kind of money. So how did you formulate, or what were the steps you took to put together your marketing plan?
Well, I think one of the first things I decided to do was, since, I didn't have the money to do this marketing plan, I started kind of creating a list of, first thing I went to social media. Social media is kind of one of the best ways to do it. First and foremost, I had a Goodreads account. You kind of need a Goodreads account if you're going to be an author nowadays. It's one of the best ways to connect with people. 2, Twitter account. 3, Facebook account. Now, I think some people might believe that you need to be on every single social media. No, you don't. You need to be on the ones that matter. You need to focus on a couple and then be as good as you can on those. And on each of those, join forums, interact with people, make friends. Just interact, and don't just be a promoter. Don't just talk about, hey, buy my book, because people are those broadcasters, whether it be on Twitter, whether it be on Facebook, whether it be on Goodreads, those people get tuned out. Now, I'm not saying that you don't promote your book, but one of the best things is that just talk with people, start a conversation, and then also, if there's something that you think is cool that relates to the genre of your book, promote it, talk about it, Talk about like something you saw on IO9, or, hey, there's this cool sci-fi short film you just happen to find on YouTube. Start a conversation, something that relates to what is, make yourself an expert on the genre that you're writing about. Show yourself as an expert. And that way, it's like you start a conversation and you build relationships with your fans. Because I think one of the most important things is, particularly if you want to be a writer in the long term, it's not just about getting sales. It's about building relationships and making sure that, hey, people who are becoming fans of your books, they become your advocates. That is key, too. You build these relationships with people. You reward them for being advocates. It's not just, you don't just kind of, oh, okay, you bought my book. Okay, no thanks. You actually build a relationship. These are people who took the time to, 1, buy your book, spend money on your book, 2, to read your book, and if you're lucky, give you a great review. The best thing you can do is reward them, whether it be with, sneak peeks, special content, or just having a conversation, building a relationship. And that way, it's like sometimes these people will be your best advocates. And that's one of the best ways. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, and for those people who believe, and I've talked to them, they go, well, social media is okay, but basically you're already preaching to your own choir, which is not necessarily so, but there's a germ of truth to that. But the part about Goodreads is a very good. I went and I did my thing on Goodreads, put up my my profile and things like that, and things are starting to pick up. I also really rely on the reviews that I get on Amazon, because those people buy books based on those.
This is very true.
And,
yes.
And once they get into you, now, and even some of my friends at BSFS, they're like beating me down, going, "Hey, when is the last book coming out? Hey, when is the last book coming out? Hey, when is the last?" So you're absolutely right about building the kind of relationship where people are your advocate and they will proselytize for you. So, with you having had, your Star Brigade out for as long as you have, first edition, second edition, what kind of feedback have you been getting from readers?
I've been getting, it's been interesting. It's been, majority has been positive, but, there have been some people there have been some, negative reviews here and there. And just, some of it's been, some people thought that there was too many POVs. But a lot of the people who really enjoyed the book, they really enjoyed that there was a wide, this huge universe. And this new universe where it's just like you have these characters, and they're not just cookie-cutter characters. They're three-dimensional, they're thought out, they're fleshed out, and you see all sides of the spectrum. You see what's going on with the heroes. You see what's going on with the villains. You see the people who are caught in between this battle between good and evil. So you're not just seeing you're not just seeing the good guys and the bad guys. What about the people who live in this world, the people who are going to be directly affected by the battle between these forces? And I think people really appreciated that. People like that a lot. And it's interesting where, and I think I welcome all types of reviews. If people, they have every right to feel what they feel. I'm, sometimes you take it personally, but, at the end of the day, it's their opinion. And I just feel that I pretty much welcome those. Anybody, give me your thoughts. I welcome them. It's good that they're saying something.
Sure.
Silence is better. You don't want silence. You want people to care.
Oh,
you want people to actually
yeah. Because even if somebody hates it and they really put it out there, I'll give you an example. My only one-star review says that my first book struck him as more like something out of a Saturday Night Live sketch.
Oh, wow.
Than a book, because, and now, let me tell you why it was perfect. At first, I was mad I was very upset. And the thing was, I thought, well, what the hell is that all about? But then I realized it was perfect because this was a white guy who, for the life of him, couldn't imagine why black folks would choose to leave everything behind and move to, the backside of the moon in secret, and to be with just their own kind. And I was thinking, I know far too many of my contemporaries who would leave out of here like they had a rocket up their ass to to live in a situation like that. But it's the perfect review, because I'm going to do this thing down at Florida A&M in February, and they have the ability. I'm going to have them put that review up, because there is nothing more poignant about that review that there's nothing more perfect, let me say that shows excuse me, the difference in perspective between blacks and whites in this country.
Yeah.
Okay? And that, that, I'm not even mad anymore. As a matter of fact, I am thankful for this person for doing that. Not thankful like I'm going to give him some money, but thankful for him illustrating something that I was trying to get across in my writing. So apparently what I did worked perfectly in that perspective. But, it was kind of a disappointment that there are people out there who read something like that, and that's the first thing they think.
Exactly,
so, for your, for people who critique you're probably not going to get that class of person writing, but But what you say is you find value in getting those perspectives because it does kind of clue you in on exactly what people are thinking about your work, right?
Yeah, exactly. And like, I'll give you an example. Like, the funny thing is, I love it when, let's say somebody, I've gotten one or two, like a few reviews where somebody, they really just, like this one guy just savaged it. There's this one review that just savaged it, and he only read like not even a fifth of the book. And I'm just
right.
like, well, it makes more sense. Like that, he wrote this long review, and I was just like, that's a lot to get from just 20% of the book, man. But hey, that's how he felt, and you know what? You put it like what you said about the guy who gave you that 1-star review. It comes from somebody's frame of reference. He has a certain frame of reference that he's coming from. So the type of book you're writing will never resonate with him. It will never speak to him, and that happens. I wanted my book basically. My writing. I want to make sure that, hey, you know what? I want it to speak to as many people as possible, but at the same time, if you like this type of science fiction that kind of is not the conventional type of military science fiction, that's kind of where I aim for. Because when I was starting to go through, I remember I was actually kind of looking through, and actually that just got me in a train of thought. When I was actually writing this book, one of the things I wanted to look for was, what are certain things that, as much as I love science fiction, what are certain things that I don't like about science fiction, or certain cliches that I've seen? And that's some of the things I've tried to avoid in this book. I tried to make sure that, for instance, when I was writing, why do aliens in every species, they always have the same, they wear the exact same thing, and there's no different subspecies within them? Why do people who are humanoid, why do they always wear robes in the future? Why don't they wear, like, comfortable slacks or something? I'm not saying, they have to wear, like, Levi's jeans or anything, but it's just like, why don't they have just, like, clothes that they can just lounge in? Why are they always wearing these formal robes? And why is it that every single time, there's a lack of diversity in the future? I'm like, this is supposed to be the future, a couple hundred years in the future. There needs to be a little more diversity. And one of the key things I wanted to do with this book, and again, it's just kind of seeing other people's work, looking at, as much things that I didn't like about science fiction or things that kind of bothered me. Why are we just seeing one thing and there's not a diversity? And that was, it also was one of the things that led to when I changed the ethnicity of the lead character in Star Brigade. That was kind of the thing where it's like, okay, this character, we need to see more diversity. We need to see, this is the future. Let's actually show that it's the future, not just seeing one type of ethnicity, particularly among humans. And I thought that was extremely key, and just kind of writing my book and making sure that we're not seeing the same things. If I'm going to write something for people that's science fiction, particularly military science fiction, that might be in the vein of a Star Wars and a Star Trek, what am I doing that's different than what they've read before, what they've seen before? So they're not saying, okay, they can see the inspiration, but they're not seeing a carbon copy. They're seeing something different. That was very, very important.
Yeah, and I see a lot of that in especially black themed science fiction, comic books. There's so many memes that are always there. As a matter of fact, if you were to read just black themed comic books, sci-fi comic books, you would have to assume that there is no black woman out there who is, of the heroic nature, who has an A size, breast cup size,
Yeah.
Yeah, I said it. Somebody had to say it, but
you're absolutely right.
Or all of these memes that are very, very repetitive.
Yeah.
It kind of makes it hard for someone to stand out. What do? You make guys with even bigger muscles and women with bigger breasts and a bigger behind. I mean, how do you distinguish yourself visually? Tough to do.
Exactly.
And then if you can't get people if you don't do something that's pretty remarkable, especially if you're talking about a book where you don't have any illustration whatsoever, your writing has to stand alone, and it has to it has to grab people right away. That's a tough one. It is. How do you make that happen? So when you set out to produce, Star Brigade, how did you figure, what was your strategy for for distinguishing yourself and getting people to buy into your universe, your art, right off the bat? What was your strategy?
The big strategy was I wanted to make sure that, okay, as alien as certain aspects of this world is, as alien as some of the characters might come across, aside from just describing it, and I was one thing is that I make sure that I describe the world. Like, world building is one of my biggest things that I love. So I made sure that the world is very vivid and rich on paper or on whatever device that someone might be reading. But most importantly, I wanted to make sure that there was a warmth and there was a relatability to the characters, no matter how alien they were, that they had connections or they felt things. It wasn't just if there was an emotional betrayal or if there was a loss, it was felt. Or if there was a relationship, that was one of the key things, that there were relationships where it's not just like there's this tension and people are fighting and yelling at each other sometimes. Yeah, sometimes people who are the closest friends in the book, they might fight, they might come to blows, but at the end of the day, they're there for each other. They care for each other. So it's making sure that despite the backdrop of this huge, massive science fiction world, you have something that is resembling a human relationship, human characters. I think that was the thing I tried to do to make it stand out as much.
Yeah, and those are the fundamentals. Creating three-dimensional characters that people grow to love and people get invested in. And it's not like, and I think the bad analogy for how a lot of people write, especially if they don't have a lot of experience, is like a TV destruction porn, where you substitute story for explosions, death, the ridiculousness of like the last Superman or something like that.
Michael Bayham.
Or my familiar peeve that people jump on me. Well, they don't jump on me, but they chide me for it. It's like Pacific Rim was the loudest movie I have ever been to in my entire life. So you have all that noise. So again, in a book, you can't hide behind any of that.
No.
In a book, you have to produce. You have to deliver. And I think that's hard to do. Excuse me, especially for novices, because I read. I think one of the, to my way of thinking, and people can tell me, right, wrong. Everybody looks at writing differently. But one of the things that disturbs me, or at least makes it hard for me to get into a story, is when there's so much exposition and color commentary. He shot him with his BFG 9000, and the hole opened up in his opponent's chest, like, and then they give you a metaphor, and it's like every effing sentence has something like that in it, and it's like you're going, well, okay, can we just back off all of that for a little while? Tell me a little bit about what's going on in the story. And I think sci-fi is hard because, when people are writing, they go, okay, this is unfamiliar. My vision is unfamiliar. These aliens have a role, therefore I have to describe in every single sentence, the nuance, and I think it makes for a more tedious
you're right.
read. And then there's the rule. What is it? Show don't tell.
Yes.
Or and so
you hit the nail on the head there. You hit the nail. You're absolutely right, and that is something that I actually encountered very much so, particularly when I was writing the first edition of Star Brigade. I did that a lot because I had to describe, because this is a very unfamiliar world. These are unfamiliar aliens, and I did have to over-describe, but I tried to scale back on that a lot when I was rewriting the book in the second edition, because as much as you want to describe every single detail, it's like it's tedious, and people are they're gonna like, okay, where was I before? They're gonna completely lose track of the story. But back to kind of what you were saying about cliches and Destruction Coin, the lead character of the book, he kind of goes through a huge loss, a series of losses that we don't really see on screen. Now, in a traditional cliched science fiction story, we would see this guy at the ass end of the galaxy in some freaking watering hole, getting drunk off his ass, probably getting in a bar fight, before being drawn back into duty. I decided not to do that. When we see this guy, the first time we see the character or introduced to him, he's like at the zoo with his son. That's the first time we see him. You know, I wanted to try and turn as many of the typical tropes on their head and try and avoid the typical sci-fi cliches, like the lead character being called back to duty after being in some bar getting drunk.
Right, and then he's still hung over, and everybody's going, "Hey, we need you, blah blah blah. You got to get, stand up and get on the horse again, blah 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 blah."
Yeah.
Exactly, and look at how many stories start out that way.
Exactly.
What was it? The first reboot of Star Trek, between Kirk getting in that bar fight. And
yes.
I almost couldn't see the movie because all those damn lens flares. I had to put my sunglasses inside the theater so I could watch the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. I think people reach for those because they're easy, they're known, and they're comfortable. A lot of people are very scared to get away from mainstream tropes because they think that, people are gonna read the first page and then throw it away. And people who read books are a rare breed anyway, and they're a special breed. Some books start out slower than others. If you're really worried about that sort of thing, you should gravitate to producing comic books because there's the immediacy, there's twice the stimulation, the visual. But it takes guts to write a book because
it does.
As much as you don't want to think that it's validation or indictment of whether you are skilled, whether you're an idiot, whether you know what you're doing or not, it's a uniquely personal experience, and it does require a level, an unaccustomed level of skill.
Yeah, it's a labor of love too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a huge labor of love because there are some days when you just get into a zone and it's just the words are just flowing out of your brain through your fingers and you're just typing up a storm. And then there are other days when it's just like you hit a wall and you just hate that thing. You hate the project with a passion. But at the end of the day, you just want to delete the whole thing. But at the end of the day, I think you have to really want to do, because I understand, like when I told a lot of people that I had written a book, they're just like, "Oh, I could never do that." And you're right. It's not for everyone. Not everyone can write a book. But, the people who do, it's not easy. Some people make it look easy. But it's just you have to really have a passion for it, and you really have to believe in your vision. I think that's the key thing is you have to believe in what you're writing. Because if you don't, then you're never going to get anywhere. You're going to just continue to maybe be in, maybe not even get past the rough draft. So.
Yeah, I have a friend who's not my friend anymore. Haven't seen him. He's had a new baby and everything. And what happened was he happened to be sitting at the restaurant where I had just gotten the proofs, the actual proofs of my first book, hardcover and softcover. And so, people were taking a look at him, and he said, "Hey, I've been writing a book too." And I said, "Really? What's it about?" And he kind of described it. I said, "How long have you been writing?" And he says, "Well, I guess it's been about 7-8 years now." And I'm thinking, well, okay, is it War and Peace? I'm thinking maybe it was really long. He said, "No," and he said, "No. The problem is I have to be inspired. I have to be in the right mood, and with the baby and everything, and getting married and this and that and this and that. There's just too much going on. I can't get to it." And he will never finish that book. He will never finish that book because, with people scrapping today, fighting for a job, having a family, Maybe they're taking care of their parents or anything like that. With all of the major distractions that everybody has in their life, those people who don't have great wealth, it's hard to find that mood.
Yeah.
So if you're going to be serious about writing, you have to, I wrote it in my first book. I treat it like a job. Every day I sit down, I write for like 3 or 4 hours or edit. So, there is a commitment, an unaccustomed commitment for somebody who's never done it that also goes along with it. Take us through kind of like when you're in full-on writing mode, what is your like daily schedule like? Like for me, it's like I punch the clock at 10 p.m. Okay, I punch the clock. Then I get on the computer and I'm writing, editing, researching, or whatever till about 1, 2, or 3 in the morning. Every day. Every day when I'm in full-on writing mode.
I need to be that disciplined.
No, I'm serious. Hey, look, I'll brag a little bit. I can write a 500-page novel in 5 or 6 months.
That's impressive.
But it's a job.
Yes.
If you had a job, if you had to get up in the morning, go someplace, punch a clock, sit down and write a story, and then you punch out at, if you get there at 8, punch out at noon or whatever, you're going to finish your book.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Good, bad, or ugly, whether the story is good, bad, or not, if you devote, that thinking to it, you will finish. So, and I'm not saying that that's the best way for everybody. I mean, that's just what worked for me. My first book with my stupid-ass self, I took 9 months, and I wrote a 750-page book.
That's impressive.
Because I didn't know what I was doing. And, all the research and all of that stuff, I did a lot of work for that first book because I didn't know what I was doing. But I still got it done because I treated it like a job.
Yeah.
And so that was my method. Like, how do you when you're in full-on writing mode, give us kind of like the schedule, the way you devote your time, break up your time in order to do the writing.
Well, I remember when I was in full-on writing mode, one of the things I did was I actually wrote in the morning for basically my head. It always worked better for me to write in the morning because, you just wake up, your head's completely clear, you're not like drained from the 9 to 5 job. So that was like my schedule is that I just got on it. I wrote for like an hour and a half in the morning, and then I go to work. And then maybe I kind of pick at it like later in the day when I got back, but usually the morning was like my best time to write. And I think I need to get back on that schedule because one of the things that I started doing is actually an interesting thing to kind of recharge my creative juices is that I actually started writing short stories to kind of balance my time because I think one of the things I'm going to start doing, say in the future, is I want to try and multitask because I think, particularly since I want to do this and I'm in it for the long haul, one of the most important things is that it's got to be kind of like a machine. You're writing one thing, you're editing another thing. You're editing one thing, you're writing another thing. So it's almost kind of like a conveyor belt, and I mean that in a good way. And also at the same time, it's good to do that because let's say you're writing that big project, you're writing that book. You need something to kind of, just so you're not getting too worn out and you're not getting too burned out on that one project, you have something else to kind of jumpstart your creative juices that you can jump to at the same time.
That's what a lot of people say. A lot of people say it helps them to work on more than one thing at a time so they can switch off because it keeps them from getting stale.
Exactly.
And a lot of people swear by the fact that in some ways that prevents writer's block.
Yes.
Because you're not so steeped in it, you don't, sometimes you can write yourself into a hole. Excuse me. So no, that makes entirely too much sense to me. I never did it that way because, in some ways I don't have the sense of a houseplant, but no, I'm serious. I mean, like I said, my first book, I'm so busy worrying about Tom Clancy guys, I'm looking up, so what kind of Soviet missiles did they have in Iraq in 1978? And who the hell but some Tom Clancy reader is going to know that and gig me on that anyway?
Yeah.
But paranoia and insecurities. I'll tell you right now, I am a maybe a slightly atypical insecure writer, but I am still an insecure writer because as much as I know, it's just a story. You know, you can't take it seriously if somebody gives you a bad review, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, for creative people, it's still, and it's still a validation of self.
It is.
You know, so.
It's something you created and something that you're putting out into the world that came from you. It's your brainchild. And you put so much of your energy and your time into it that if somebody kind of besmirches it or somebody doesn't like it, you, of course, you feel like it's a personal attack, even though technically it isn't. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
So you've got the first one out there. It's in its second edition. You kind of cleaned it up. You changed it the way you wanted it to.
Mm-hmm.
Are you working on its successor?
I am. I'm working on not necessarily the direct sequel, but basically those short stories I told you about that were kind of just to recharge the batteries. I ended up coming up with like several dozen of them. So basically the next
several dozen. Wait. Several dozen short stories?
Yes.
That's incredibly prolific.
It just like happened where it's just like I wanted to just come up with it's something I'd wanted to do for a while because I remember this one of the big sci-fi franchises in the book series edition. They came up with these short stories where I remember I think it was Star Wars where it was the Tales of series, and what it was is that in one of the books it was like Tales from Mos Eisley Cantina, Tales from Jabba the Hutt's Palace, and it was like all these short stories from these non-movie characters, all of them taking place around this one major important event that happened. Like in Mos Eisley Cantina, it was when Luke and Obi-Wan met Han Solo. And then, of course, at Jabba the Hutt's Palace, it was when, Luke came to rescue Han Solo and Leia from Jabba. And so what I decided to do was make these short stories that took place around the events of the first book, almost kind of like a companion piece.
Okay.
So you have, POVs from certain, characters in the book that they were non-POV characters, but they were important characters. And then you have certain POVs from non-book characters. They weren't even in the books, but they were in these important moments that happened around the first book. And towards the end, like some of the later short stories lead towards future storylines that are going to take place in future books. So that's the project I'm working. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask you, I have thought of doing something similar. I've just started doing short stories, but they're not in the universe. Hold on, let me do this real quick. You're listening to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, a service of BlackScienceFictionSociety.com. And tonight's special guest, I keep forgetting, it's the October 24th, 2014 edition. And we're speaking with Charles Ekeke, and he has written his first book, and it's in its second edition, Star Brigade. Check it out on Goodreads. Check it out. Are you selling on Amazon as well, Charles?
I'm on Amazon, iTunes, Nook, Google Play, and Kobo and Smashwords. So I'm pretty much all over.
Anybody listening to this, you have no damn excuse for not finding his work. Well, I'm just being honest. Okay, so doing the short stories makes sense because then you can do a compendium, you can do any kind of thing. One of the things I was thinking of doing was once the Dark Side trilogy is done and it's being pushed back a little because it's taking a little longer. I wanted to open it up to other writers to write short stories in that universe, from a different perspective and things like that. Because then there's obviously the creative synergy of other people's ideas. Who was that? For the Asimov.
I'm sure Asimov did it. Yeah.
Yeah, his wife. I forget her name. Carol? I don't know. Whatever. Anyway, she authorized the other people to come in and guest write for the Foundation series. And that was kind of cool seeing, some of the classic sci-fi people who I've followed for most of my life applying their spin to something that was, so familiar to me and so so responsible for me actually finally at the ripe old age of whatever I was, 70 or whatever, sitting down and actually writing my own book. And so that appeals to me because I would like to see what other people can come up with for my universe. It's kind of exciting if you create something large enough where there's space enough to do that.
Mm-hmm. That would actually, I'll be honest with you, I would love to do that down the road. I think since the Star Brigade universe is still kind of in its infancy, it's like I don't know if my universe would be kind of attract that much attention. I do remember who did this was Peter David. Peter David actually, he has been writing this Star Trek offshoot series called New Frontier, and he's been doing it for like years. And I remember he actually did this anthology called No Limits, and basically it has all these characters that he's crafted and created. They're written by all these different sci-fi authors. And it's actually really, really good. It's a really, really great kind of anthology, and he, of course, is the main editor of it. And, that's something I would like to do down the road. I think if I've gotten a couple more books out, then yes, I would definitely love to do that.
Well, no, I mean, yeah, it's new. I mean, and there's no, you need make no excuse for the fact that you want to coddle this thing because, for damn sure, you want to make sure that it takes off the way you want it to take off. You don't want anybody co-opting it or ruining it because in any creative universe's infancy, it's like you said about my stuff. It's your baby, and you want to make sure that you've got, when I do what I do, if I open it up to other people, I have to have a universe Bible. I have to have a Bible for things that can and cannot happen in my creative universe. And that takes a lot of work because what it does is it forces you to think about your work in a way that you didn't when you were writing it. Some people will write a whole Bible about their creative universe and then go and write their stories. I fully respect that because I don't think I could have done it. I was anal enough that I did a flow chart of the plot because I didn't know what else to do. I pulled out Vizio, and I'm serious, man. I was sitting at a desk at a social service agency waiting for some stuff to happen. And I thought to myself, no matter what you write or what stories you have in your head, they don't exist until you put them on paper. Yeah. So I had no idea how to write a book. So I said, well, let me flowchart a plot and see if that works. And that's how I did it because I didn't know. But as I'm writing, I was in no shape, and there was really no opportunity. Like if I was going to do a collaborative story at that stage, I wouldn't have known how to do it because everything was inside my head.
Yeah, it's funny. Kind of the same way. When I started writing this book, I actually just started writing it. I was pulling everything from my head, and it was extremely difficult to the point where I had to stop writing and then just outline everything, just so I didn't have to it was just like all the plot, just basically the bare bones plot. I just outlined the bare bones plot, and then it was so much easier to write after that because you have that kind of almost like Dumbo's magic feather right there beside you to help you kind of, okay, if I get lost or if I'm trying to pull something, I have this plot right here, and then I can do the jump off point. It's so much easier because you have that foundation, and then it makes, let's say something changes in the story. You're just writing, you're in the midst of it, and then something just doesn't feel right, and you're just like, what if I try this direction? It makes those types of changes so much more organic, and it makes it so much more fun. It makes it much more fun, makes the writing process that much more fun because you're not just pulling everything straight out from your head. You have that plot right there in front of you.
Yeah, I was pulling it straight out of someplace about 3 feet lower. But but I will say this, that I wish I would have had a little more training in fundamentals. I never really took a writing class, and there are times, now I'm so much better. I wrote my first book in 2001, and it didn't get published till 2009. But in the intervening time, I've read an awful lot about how to, the creative art of writing.
Yeah.
There's an American novelist named John Gardner, and he has several books out about writing writing novels. And so I know more now, than I did before. As a matter of fact, since I finished the third book in the trilogy, I'm at the point now where I want to go back and I want to do just like you, man. I want to do a second edition of the first book.
Oh, nice.
Because I think I will clean it up and it'll be a much, much better story.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you've arrived at that place far, far sooner than I did, but
yeah.
This is pretty cool that you understand your own writing, your writing needs and your fundamentals, where you were able to do that right away and get that done.
Yeah.
Do you have like synopses for the following volumes that you're going to have in your series, or are they kind of living in your head? How's that process moving along for you?
It's a mixture of both, where I have like rough synopses, but I have the plots. Like the plots are percolating in my head and starting to form more. But I definitely have a synopsis of, okay, this is what I'm going to do with the next book. This is what I'm going to do with another, with the following books. I have a draft of the follow-up book. It needs a lot of work. So that is actually been created, but I need to actually get to it and clean it up quite a bit, because I haven't really touched it in like a year or two, because I was so focused on doing the rewrites for the first book. So now that I've come, and the great thing is that now that I've kind of done these rewrites for the first book, I can implement, okay, this is the direction I want to change in the entire universe, and I can implement that into the second book. So it ends up working out a lot better.
Yeah. Now you mentioned that you're a big fan of social networking.
Mm-hmm.
Do you interact very much with your fans via social networking?
Not as much as I'd like. I'd say here and there on Twitter, there's sometimes where I interact as much as I can. I'd like to interact more. It's something that it's still something you do it when you can, but I'd like to do it more so, because it's actually fun when you're able to just have a conversation with people. And it's not just about you promoting what you're doing. It's just like, hey, we found this thing kind of cool. And sometimes what I'll even do is if I'll put something up, let's say on Twitter, I'll put something up that's not necessarily, it's just like an opinion or a conversation starter. If people respond to it, awesome. Sometimes they don't. But it's something that I'd like to do more of in the future, is to interact more with people who enjoyed my book or are my followers or like my Facebook fan page.
And what about maybe traveling to like Black Age conventions and things like that?
I would like to do that more.
I was going to say, is that on your radar?
It hasn't really been on my radar yet, but I would love to do that more. I'd love to go to some of the smaller cons. I think in the past I've gone to some, like, I think the smaller LA Comic-Con, not WonderCon. I know WonderCon was up in like Seattle at one point, and now it's in like Anaheim. But I would like to go to some of the smaller cons, because it would be nice to, if people are interested and people want, I'd love to do that, actually. It's something I'd like to maybe do in the future, if so.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've been to Comic-Con, and that kind of scared me off, because it's just so massive now, and it's just kind of, it's almost like a Comic-Con in name only. But
it's a commercial. It's like a big commercial for actually the big money conglomerates and their next new project. And it's
exactly.
You're exactly right. It has lost its Comic-Con roots. It's that feel, that intimacy, that it's one big commercial.
Yeah, I remember when I first went to the San Diego Comic-Con. It was about 11 years ago. It was 2003. And at that point, you could still get tickets the same day. You can't do that anymore. Like, the lines weren't as bad. It was actually, you could navigate around. It was actually, it was fun to go to. And now it's just, I remember just reading a couple articles where even the long-time goers are just like, this is too much. This is bad. This is not even fun anymore. Like, even if you go and, spend the night before, that's still not, you still aren't guaranteed to get into Hall H or Room 20. And I like the intimacy of some of the smaller comic conventions where hey, you have a little bit of a crowd. Of course, there's going to be hustle and bustle on the floor. There's going to be some panels, but at the same time, there's still the intimacy of some of the comic conventions of old. Like, I don't know if Kamikaze is like that. Kamikaze might be a little like that still. Have you heard of Kamikaze?
No, I haven't. I mean, the one that I want to go to is right here in Chicago. I missed it this year. It's C2E2. I haven't been to anything like that, mostly because of this ankle bracelet from the sheriff. But I mean, if I could travel, I'm not sure which one I would. Like you said, I thought about Comic-Con, but then I thought, well, that's like just going to one big, a whole bunch of commercials and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I do want to do a lot of the Black Age ones merely because, there's obviously the racial affinity.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be good to be able to be with like-minded people who are also going through the exact same experience as I am in terms of trying to get marketing, trying to get more universal appeal, I'm a firm believer in, if you want to have success in this kind of, in publishing, in this chosen endeavor, you can't just market to, African Americans, okay?
You're right,
and,
yes.
And because you look at, okay, let's just talk numbers. We're 12% of the population in this country, and I'm not talking about getting overseas comic book sales. I'm talking about right here and now.
Yeah.
So we're 12%. And then out of that 12%, barely 15% of African Americans read novels. Men gravitate toward nonfiction because they want to read how people do things, how people get over, what's the next business trend, things like that.
Yeah.
And Black women are the biggest reader of novels right now, and not especially most guys have trouble writing something that is relatable for women.
Yeah.
I've been exceedingly lucky. I've had actually women remark that all my women in my books sound like women. And I think that's no, I'm serious. I mean, that's a cool thing.
Cool.
But I cheat. I'm like a half black, half Japanese lesbian living in a man's body. So I have some cachet and a leg up. But having said that, I mean, all the joking aside, trying to get a sustainable audience that can actually pay your bills, so that maybe writing is becoming your primary focus, that's a tough thing to do. And very few people are able to do it. Yeah.
It's extremely tough. And it's again, just like how writing is a job, that's a job in itself, particularly with kind of what you're saying, having that schedule, getting books out, and getting quality books out too, not just churning the books out, getting quality books out, making sure that they are well edited, they have a good cover, you have at least a good launch. Because I think at the end of the day, if you want this to be your primary job, first and foremost, aside from just getting you have to write. 2, you have to have a backlist. I look at one of the best examples I look at is Dan Brown. Now, his first 3 books didn't really set the world on fire, but his 4th book happened to be The Da Vinci Code. Now, that book did gangbusters, and people liked it so much. Oh, what else has he done? He's got three books to fall back on.
Right.
And one of them happened to be, hey, this was actually the prequel to The Da Vinci Code, Angels and Demons.
Right.
So it's very key. It's very important because you never know what book will be your breakout book. And if you have that breakout book, it might be your 4th book, it might be your 5th book, it might be your 6th book. And then by that point, it's your 6th book. People really liked it. What else has he written? Boom, boom, boom. You have those 5 books, and people are going to gravitate towards those.
Right. And you have to be ready for when that happens because, people think, oh, yeah, I'll just get a bunch of money. Well, no, because the demands on you become much different.
Yes.
Because if all of a sudden you catch fire and people are calling you to do things, to be on shows, to do this, to do that, that's a whole different aspect that a lot of people don't think about ahead of time. And you see it every now and then. The first few appearances of so-and-so, they look very uncomfortable or they don't know how to answer the questions. They it's not smooth for them. And you know what? This is the one instance where you only have one chance to make a first impression, because if you have a very, very bad first interview, you don't get a second one.
No, not at all.
So
Not at all.
you have to have your anecdotes ready. You have to be able to, if you have a joke, if you have, you have to look at ease. You can't sit there sweating like a, whatever. No, I'm serious. Well, I mean, look what happened with Richard Nixon when they televised the first debate.
With him and JFK, yes.
He had a 5 o'clock shadow. He was perspiring. And Fangate now for the Florida governor guy, Scott, and the other guy. One guy had a fan blowing on him, keeping him cool, and the other guy lost his mind over that. And but these are things you have to think about. If you're going to if you're going to get your 6-minute shot on TV, you damn well better be ready. You have to be ready.
And you know what? And also, you're absolutely right. You have to have a short sell for your book. Like, what is the short sell for your book? What's the elevator pitch that people can relate to right now? I think if I was going to look at, for instance, with Star Brigade, I'd say the elevator pitch for Star Brigade would be Star Trek and Star Wars meets Babylon 5 with a little bit of Battlestar Galactica, and if you look at exposition, some Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire. You got to have that so people kind of know exactly what they're getting into right away without you having to get too much in the weeds when it comes to the description. I think I gave you the long form because I was like, hey, we have some time, so let me describe a little longer. So.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now for you, let's say Star Brigade blows up tomorrow, and somebody comes to you and says, hey, we want to make a movie of this, or a 3D animated feature of this. How do you feel about that? Because, of course, you're going to lose a modicum of control when that happens.
It's interesting because it's interesting because a lot of times I have seen Star Brigade. I could see it being more than just a book. I could see it being a feature. To be honest with you, I would rather it be like a mini-series than a feature. Or maybe even just kind of like, hey, let's maybe make it like a 10-episode or 5-episode or 13-episode series, because when you kind of compress it into the feature, I think more often than not nowadays, a lot of the best stories are not being told on film, not like when you were younger. A lot of the best stories are being told in TV series. You're seeing that now with the Game of Thrones series. There's no way you could have made that into a movie.
Right.
So, and for instance, even, I don't know, have you heard of the new Daredevil series that's coming out next year?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, so basically with that, I think one of the reasons why the initial iteration of Daredevil as a movie didn't work was because Daredevil has such a rich story. There's such a rich story to him, Hell's Kitchen, his war with the Kingpin. There's no way you can really compress that into a movie and then, of course, throw in the love interest and kind of make that story interesting and actually believable. But what they're doing now is making it like a 13-episode series. That way you get to really get to know the character of, I can't believe I forgot his name, Matt Murdock. You get to know Matt Murdock. You get to know the world that he inhabits. You get to know all the characters. You get to even know the Kingpin a little bit. What is his backstory? What is his motivation? And if Star Brigade was going to be more than just a book, I'd rather it be a television series because there's a lot of story. There's a lot of things that would get lost if it's just a movie that's compressed into 2 hours?
Yeah. And somebody wants to know who did your book cover?
Oh, my book cover. Basically, Derek Murphy did my book cover. He's a fantastic indie book cover artist. It was funny. The first book cover I used, I got what I paid for. It wasn't really great, but this book cover, that was one thing I wanted to do when I released the second edition, is I needed a completely new book cover. I happened to find him online. Derek Murphy is fantastic. He's very talented. He's also very swamped right now because so many people are requesting his services, but he did wonders for my book cover. He's the guy that I went to.
Yeah, people say don't judge a book by its cover, but that's exactly what people judge your books by.
Exactly, yeah.
So I got the artist who does the artwork for the Walking Dead TV show to do my second cover.
Oh, dude, nice.
And it oh man, he did a great job.
Yeah.
mean, he put an element in there that I didn't even think of that that was so powerful. I mean, take a look at it on BSFS when you have a chance, but there a lot of people skimp on getting their artwork done.
You can't.
And that ultimately that is the best marketing tool for your book. Better than an ad, better than anything else, because people do judge a book by its cover. I have a corollary for that. I had a stereo store way back in the 70s. And what was so funny to me was the specifications for the stereo equipment didn't matter a bit. I mean, it did to a very small percentage, maybe 10%, but the rest of the people went by the lights. Oh, man, that looks cool. Look at the lights on that. And I'm thinking, but it sounds like crap. No, but look. And, whatever they would, whatever it was that tripped their trigger. But I can't, obviously, what makes a comic book most appealing to somebody at first blush?
Yeah.
And that's the cover. And I don't think a novel is much different in terms of what that cover says about the art,
Yeah, and that's basically what happened with my first book cover, is that I did skim on the artwork when the first edition years ago, and it was a huge hurdle that I was, to get over when people actually saw the book cover. They're just like, what is this? And, some people actually, thankfully there were people who were able to
look at it like that?
They actually said it. Some people weren't as kind. Some people weren't as kind. But basically, it was when people got past it, then it was like, hey, this was a really good book. So this time around, I was just like, I have to make sure that the book cover just hits, because I'm getting the opportunity to have a second chance, because this way more people will see it. And if I really want this to work, the book cover has to be amazing. And I was fortunate to be able to get Derek Murphy to do such a good book cover like this time around. Like the minute I even showed it to my friends, some of them who knew that I'd written a book before, they're just like, oh my goodness, it's so much better. I'm like, wow, thanks for being so honest. But no, it was actually, he was awesome. And I'd recommend him to anyone who's looking for a pretty fair price on a book cover.
Well, it's a gorgeous cover. And I like, what I like about it a lot? Your ego has not completely blown you up where your name is bigger than the title.
Oh, no, I could never do that. I would never do that.
Well, don't say never, because you know what? If HarperCollins picks you up or something like that, they may want to do that. And how do you say no to that? What's interesting about book publishers is they will look at your book, they will look at the story, and they'll be able to guess within about 100 books how many books you're going to sell that first year that they push out. I don't know how they do that, but that's what they do. And so, and this is, partly when you get a contract like that, and I'm not saying this for sour grapes, because I know exactly why I don't have one yet. But when you get a contract like that, you're going to be assigned an editor. You're going to be assigned, to, team members who are going to squire your book. And, the editor's job is to make it, commercially viable, and also pee on it a little bit so that it's partly theirs.
Yes.
But that's just it. And if you obviously you got this part of the equation down. Good artwork is huge. When somebody picks up the book, they're going to look at the front, they're going to look at the cover, then they're going to look at the back and look for the synopsis. And if you have a good synopsis, someone is more likely to purchase. And ultimately, that's what we're going for. People who say, "Oh, I don't write for anybody else; I just write for myself." And I go, "Well, why aren't you doing a diary?" And then they get mad at me, and then I've lost a friend. But ultimately, we are looking for financial satisfaction in creating our art. And in order to do that, then you have to be invested in doing the best possible job you can.
Exactly. And so and that includes spending a little money, because, that's what people are going to see. It's like the best representation, the best visual representation of what's going on inside, behind that cover, is the cover. And, that's kind of one of the key things, is aside from just editing, which you need to do, the editing is extremely important, book cover. And just make it where I wanted to make sure that, because I remember the first book cover, I had some of the characters on it, but this time around I wanted to make sure, I don't want to take away how people are going to visualize the character. Based on what I read, I want to make sure that they actually, what they see is what they see, and I don't want to craft that for them other than what they read in my words.
No, you're very wise, and most people don't even think of that. Most people think, well, let me put this woman on here with this chest who, if she was in real life, would constantly be falling down, and let me put these guys up here with muscles so big they can't wipe themselves when they go to the bathroom. Let me put all that on the cover. And really, what
Well, because I'm a very
mental medium. It's a mental medium.
Yeah, because I'm a very visual person, so I kind of know in my head. I know what the characters look like, but again, I don't want to dictate, other than how it's written, how that looks in another person's head. So I took that back, and I just made it where it's like, okay, this is basically what's on the cover is related to what's going on with the plot, and once the people get to that point, it'll make sense. But I don't want to take that away from people. But going to the cover, and one thing I plan to do as these books come out, I definitely want to make sure that all the covers kind of have a similar theme. So it's not just completely different each cover. This is going to be similar to the next book, even the companion piece. There's going to be a similarity there. And then the second book, there's going to be a similarity there. So this is kind of like the start of how I see the book covers or the cover art to be for at least the majority of the series.
All right. Now, I'm getting a little kind of spooked about this interview, and the reason why is I just ordered the artwork for my first book, from the fulfillment house because I wanted to redo it so that it looks more like books 2 and 3.
Yes.
Just last week I did that, and I like you, I understood, or I have come to understand the importance of that portion of marketing. That portion of making, you want that look and feel, and you want to own it. You really want to own it. You want to pull that together so that when people see it, they go, oh, man, look. And they'll just know that from the style, it's another edition of your work. So, yeah, I'm learning a lot of these things a lot later than you are. But I'm old. I have fewer years ahead of me than I have behind me. But all of these things are things that people, authors, artists, everybody, you have to think about in terms of your marketing because, like I said, unless you're independently wealthy and you can just pay somebody to do all your work, it's on you. Yeah,
it is, and it's even though it does take a village. At the end of the day, you are the CEO, you are the content creator. So it's that precarious line. And going back to kind of what you said earlier about kind of, let's say somebody kind of explodes and they're not prepared. There's also a situation as maybe they have the interview pushing down, but let's say they've exploded, and then now you have to manage your time in a whole different way because aside from just all the stuff you had to do before, now you have to manage this influx of requests for interviews, this influx of requests for appearances, and sometimes some people get lost in that. And it's like at the end of the day, and I think a good example would be George R. R. Martin. As much as I love his artwork, I love his books, I think he actually had to scale back on writing an episode for Game of Thrones this season because he kind of needs to finish the 6th book. Yeah, because he's getting so much attention, and it's well deserved because his books are amazing. But I think it was getting to the point where he's just like, okay, I need to scale back so I can actually get back to the meat and potatoes, which is finishing the 6th book, which is going on 5 years now.
Sure.
So I think it's very, very key to kind of keep your eye on the ball, even if all these things kind of come to pass and you do get the attention that, your book starts getting attention, your work starts getting attention. People want to see, kind of get your thoughts on things. Now you're an expert on this genre. So.
Well, and that's entirely true. That's why we got you now, because we may not be able to afford to get you later.
I'd come back. I would totally come back.
but the other thing is, there's a certain threshold that you have to reach in terms of publicity before those things happen, and that's the uphill climb. I mean, that's the huge thing that, and they're, everybody thinks, oh no, I'm here in Chicago, and I'll tell you what everybody thought the magic bullet was here in Chicago. In Chicago, every author I ran into, every single one, bar none, said, well, once I finish my book, I'm going to get Oprah to put it in her book club, and then, dude, I'm dead serious. And these are people who are serious as a heart attack. They just figured, I'll get Oprah to read it. And I'm thinking, well, first of all, how are you going to get Oprah to read it when she didn't read any of those books? She had a white lady who was like 28 years old read all that stuff. And then they look at me like, serious? I said, yeah. And then Oprah punked out at the end. When you are bringing a new author like Charles Dickens to the forefront of publicity, you have punked out. You have given up. I mean, so that's not the way. The way is to have good content, and then you have to. I think it's almost like waiting your turn. Yeah. Because it's tough to get people to read it. You walk into any editor, any reviewer's office, and you're going to see a pile of books. I mean, piles and piles of books.
Slush pile. Yeah.
I think Oprah was getting like 5,000 books a week.
Oh wow.
Think about that.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's like nuts, man. Yeah. And so what's your avenue? Well, your avenue is exactly like you said. You build up your audience. You maintain that relationship. You build that relationship. You get these people used to, making yourself accessible is so huge.
Yeah. I'll give you an example, kind of exactly what you said. And this was actually, it was funny because the friend of mine who told me about ebooks, basically he told me about this one, she was an indie author, now she's kind of like more of a hybrid author now, but this one author named Amanda Hawking, who basically, she started off just kind of writing indie paranormal romance books. And what she did that really helped her, and she was able to write these books like really quickly, but what she did that really helped her get over was she, one, interfaced with the people who loved the books, and she especially she formed relationships with book bloggers. That way, forming relationships, these people were more prone to, hey, I'll review, this girl seems pretty cool, I'm going to review her book.
Right.
And so eventually it got to the point where she couldn't be ignored by the big publishers because this girl had made, I think she'd made in total she was a self-made millionaire just off her indie books. Mm-hmm. And then it's to the point where the publishers came to her. She didn't have to go to them. They came to her because you couldn't ignore that this girl was basically a phenomenon. She had a built-in fan base. So, of course, they'd follow her anywhere. And now she's a New York Times best-selling author. Right. I think the same thing happened with, have you heard the name Hugh Howey?
No, I have not.
Yeah, Hugh Howey, basically, he wrote this series it's called the Wool series. And he basically wrote it in sections. He didn't write the full book together. I think the first book he didn't write it together. He wrote it in kind of sections, almost like episodic. And it got to the point where he got so much attention that now, again, he's a hybrid author. He does both self-published and indie author stuff, and he also does traditionally published works as well. And again, these authors, it didn't happen overnight. They had to work. They had to build up their fan base. They had to create a feasible marketing plan. So it's funny what you're saying, how, I'll just get Oprah to get, on her book club. I'm like, yeah, it doesn't work like that.
Not that and simple. They were dead serious. They were just dead serious. They just figured, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going, I met that woman who read the books for Oprah at a networking meeting. And I did not slut out and say, hey, I got a book. Because, first of all, it's inappropriate, and second of all, it wouldn't have worked anyway. But I talked to her about the process, and she said, and this was near the end of when Oprah, I would say probably within a year and a half of when Oprah was about to end her show. Mm-hmm. And she had been burned by those two authors who had written these so-called life stories, and they were lies in them and got busted out and stuff like that. And so that was when Oprah went, that was when she went to choosing Charles Dickens, and I just shook my head and said, well, it's all over now. Well, it was. I mean, anyways, I think she's doing something new now. But it's like everybody thinks there's a shortcut. I used to teach and coach tennis, and people said, would come to me and they go, well, how can I hit a ball the way you do? How can I learn how to do that? And I said, and I'd get them in close, and I go, okay, I'll tell you the secret, but you can't tell anybody else because obviously this is. And then they go, well, okay, what is it? I said, hit 1,000,000 balls, and then I'd walk away. Because there's no shortcut to a bunch of stuff. You have to be a good writer. If you get discovered, cool. But lightning doesn't strike very often, and it doesn't always strike in a good way.
Yeah.
So it's good that you have a good forward-thinking, long-term strategy. You're building a big universe. You have diverse characters. They're three-dimensional, and you're investing in the marketing portion, the passive marketing portion, which is making sure that your cover art is good. So it's like you've got the full package. And are you seeing, and I know it's kind of, even though it's still kind of new, but when you look at what you're doing, are you getting the feel that the momentum is building behind you? Are you seeing hints of that?
I'm seeing that. I'm definitely getting more reviews. That's important thing. Like when I look at Goodreads, I definitely see my book in a lot of to-read piles and bookshelves, so that's good. I think I could get probably a better gauge of that once I think the second, like my next release comes out. Then I can see, okay, how much momentum have I built, and is it kind of working in my favor? I know that in particular, even though I don't want to rush out the next release, I know that I need to definitely continue the momentum. I can't take too long in between books because if people really liked it, there's so much media. There's such a blitzkrieg of media nowadays. People could quickly forget it if it takes me a year and a half to release another book. So I definitely want to get the next thing. And this is one of the reasons why I want to get the anthology out there, because it's kind of a nice in-between. It kind of continues the story, expands the story of the first book, but at the same time, it kind of continues the story of these characters and introduces new characters as well.
Well, it keeps it fresh.
Yes.
Exactly. Because, and you're going to get feedback from people about, hey, I really liked, I picked up your anthology. I really liked the story that had such and such.
Yes, exactly.
And if enough people say that, then you go, hey, this is something that's catching on, and people are really interested. And again, it's almost like really cheap market research.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's effective because you're going right to the source. It's not like there's some focus group who never heard of you, and then somebody reads a few paragraphs of what you've written, and they go, so what do you think about that? And these are people who are already invested in you. So exactly. I think that all the things you're doing, and I'll be the first one to say this because somebody's going to chew my butt out later, but I'll be the first one to say I don't know everything, but I do recognize the value in good planning, and it sounds like you've done a lot of that good planning.
Yes.
Do you have anybody helping you with the any facet of the self-publishing business for you? Do you have any kind of collaborators, people who, do you have a certain set of readers? Do you have your go-to people for, like when I kind of run into a stumbling block, I'll go back over the fundamentals of my story, and I'll go back over what I know about the characters and things like that. And then, if I'm really stuck, there's a couple people that I'll call who have read all my work, and they can say, hey, have you considered or whatever. Do you have those kind of support people in your life right now?
I actually do. It was funny. One of my friends it was funny. He was actually my college roommate when I came to this epiphany that I wanted to write. We're both like huge sci-fi fantasy fans, and there's some times that I will kind of go to him and I'll kind of ask for his advice here and there if I am kind of stuck on something, or just like, hey, here's this thing I'm planning, here's this direction I'm planning to go. What do you think about it? So every so often I'll kind of ask his advice on that, and he usually is kind of he keeps me honest more often than not. And I do actually, I think right now I am kind of starting to build up that support group, if you will. I didn't necessarily have it as much when I first released this book years ago, but now on I'm starting to kind of build that up. Like, for instance, the cover artist who I'm going back to, a set of reviewers, and some actual beta readers. I'm starting to kind of build that support group up so that as I keep on releasing books, I have that group that the book or ideas can go through. So it's just a lot cleaner and a lot smoother of a process in the future.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you know, for those who are listening, and for you too, you know, not that you're going to get much input from any significant fraction, but there's 4,400 people who are members of BSFS, Black Science Fiction Society.com, and I get a little bit of feedback for whatever work I expose. I don't put up a lot, but that's also a good pool of very talented people. So you never know who you're going to run into. And the other thing is, one thing I do want to mention to you to be sure to do, if you're going to do any convention, if you're going to have an appearance or something there, put it on the events calendar at BSFS, because when the weekends come up and people, or even during the week, when people have spare time and they're looking for something to do, and maybe they're looking at, well, I don't know exactly if I want to go to this convention, but then they'll see, Charles is going to be there. Let's go check him out because we heard him on the show or whatever, or even read excerpts of your work. It's a good community to belong to, and it also has some pretty decent tools for getting some information out, and you never know who you're going to run into. I mean, there's a cast of the usual suspects who hang out and chat. So that's also a decent resource that you may not have utilized, or that you may get on there and decide, man, these people are whack. I am not coming back here again. Hopefully that's not going to happen. That won't be your experience, because there are not very many active communities that support our work in our genre. And this is one that you don't have any bitchy people hanging around, and they're really some bright people.
That's a good thing.
So and you're in Southern California, so you make an appearance there. There's a lot of people, from California who are members of BSFS, and if you're going to have an appearance, let them know. That way you can kind of run into the people you're going to see online.
Okay. All right. No, that definitely sounds like a good idea. It sounds like a good group of people. I remember, and it's funny because one of your previous guests, I think I was telling you before the show started, one of the previous guests, he's actually a friend of mine, and he's the one who told me about the Black science fiction community, and he told me about the radio show. So they're right there, and it seems like a bunch of cool people who are just they're very passionate about this, and it's nice. It's interesting because when I was growing up, I didn't realize this, section and this kind of subsection existed. I was kind of like, okay, I'm just kind of an anomaly. But it's nice to know that there is a huge and growing community when it comes to, just people who are passionate and are creators of Black science fiction. It's fantastic to see that.
Somebody wants to know which one of the previous interviewees is your friend.
Oh, Scott Evans, who does CD Nation.
Okay.
Yeah, CD Nation.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, we're both in LA, so yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of funny that you wouldn't. Well, no, it's not funny. It makes sense that you wouldn't know, because if you watch science fiction through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, well, 80s, they didn't plan for us to be around.
No.
Okay. Or they put a red shirt on us, and then we'd be gone in the first 6 minutes of the show. So it's good. It's good that it's catching on, and the movement of Afrofuturism is something that's gaining a louder voice, and is being promoted in a way that's all positive. There's really no negatives attached to it. That's usually what people try to do, with something new. They try to run it down. But the fact of the matter is, we're a very creative community, and even those of us who speak like this and like you and I, instead of
I know where you're going.
I said that.
I know where you're going.
But you know what I'm saying? No, come on. I mean,
Yeah.
I went through that too. You know, as a matter of fact, somebody even on this show said, you sound so white. And let's not go there. But it is cool that it's like this upswelling of awareness.
Yeah.
You've got Natasha Womack wrote the book, the Afrofuturism book, and mentioned, some of the authors who are kind of up and coming. And you look at, work like yours. You're spending an extraordinary amount of time and effort to make sure it's done well, and that's something that gives you longevity right out of the box. Because if it's done well, then it will last. If it's done well, it will. There will be some momentum behind it, if nothing else than sheer inertia. So it's kind of a cool way to watch exactly how all this is happening. And I'm having a good time watching, this year, next year, to see things, that come out of these Black Age conventions, and also to see more and more people who are writing about the genre from the perspective of documentarian or writing a scholarly work about the movement and not just writing the stories.
And you know what? Kind of what you said earlier. I remember you were talking about how we are still 12% of the population in the States, and I think one of the things that and this is what I wanted to convey in my story, is that as much as I want to, I'm glad that there is Black science fiction out there, and I'm glad that, I want there to be more people, more characters of color out there in science fiction as a whole. I think it's important to realize that, it's not just about, okay, let's just have this Black character and then he's kind of isolated, or this group is kind of isolated. It's kind of having diversity. I think that's extremely key in showing integration, especially if you're going into the future, because you want to make sure that you're not just catering to one demographic. And one of the things that I think is great about science fiction as a whole, or speculative fiction, is that it's supposed to be inclusive. People who from all different walks of life gravitate towards this for a reason. So we should be inclusive in our writing as well, in terms of what we represent in our writing. It's very important, because you don't want to have it where it's like you have an opportunity to draw somebody in, and even if you're exposing them to something new, sometimes if there's an element in your story that they can relate to, or something that really speaks to them, that is so key, even if this person is not Black at all. And I think that it's very key that, and this is something I want to convey in my writing, is just to make sure that it's not, it speaks to all types of people who like science fiction. It's extremely key, and it just shows diversity. That's one of the most important things, is that it just pulls people in a good way, and it pulls people, doesn't matter if their race, their religion, their gender. And I think that's key just for all types of Black science fiction, is if there's something that can pull somebody in who has never heard of this before. I think that's one of the reasons why Octavia Butler, her work is still, resonates today. It was such a proponent of Afrofuturism, is because there were aspects of her story that drew people in. Doesn't matter what gender, what ethnicity, what religion they were from.
Yeah, that is true. And the thing that I do point out, when we earlier in the show, if you want to be financially successful, you have to write content. You have to create content that has a universal appeal.
Exactly.
It's got to appeal to it's got to appeal to the genre, not to the race.
Yeah.
It has to have the appeal has to be broad enough that you're going to attract, all kinds of people, like you said, all kinds of people. I will tell you something that stunned me. More white women are reading my books than any other demographic.
Really? Interesting.
And as Rock said in the 1990 show, I ain't worked that part out yet, but it's stunning to me. But then when I dug a little bit deeper into the demographics, black women read more than black men, and black women are a huge demographic in terms of actually reading books, reading novels and things like that. So again, it was an unexpected thing, and so now as I write, I think about not writing for black women, but I think about writing for that universal appeal that you were talking about, because that's really what's going to carry you over the finish line if you're going to become a very, very successful and a pretty well-known writer.
Yeah.
So if you have, just sum it up in a paragraph, if you have any advice for someone who wants to get where you are, being published, having a decent product, what advice would you give them?
Well, the advice I'd give them, first and foremost, write. That's where it starts.
Yeah.
You got to write. Secondly, if you really want to get published, just because you're not traditionally published doesn't make you any less of an author. There is nothing wrong, and there's nothing, second class about being self-published. There's no shame in it. There's no pride in it. You're no less an author if you go the indie route. And even better, granted, a lot of it's on you in terms of what you have to do, but at the same time, you have all the control. So I think it's just you got to write. You got to, if you want to be traditionally published, fine, but there's no shame in being an indie author. And just make sure that, if when you kind of get your book out there, that the book is the best quality. And don't be afraid to get another opinion, get editing, because it takes a village to get a book out. Even though it's your book, it does take a village. And that includes editing, artwork, even promotional help. Don't be afraid to reach out to get a community to help you get your book out.
I actually, in my first book, I thanked all of the restaurants in the neighborhood that delivered. I swear to you, man, for helping me so I didn't have to get dressed and go out and eat. They brought me food when I was doing that first book because I was putting in more time than I could afford. So and that's the other thing. Be gracious in acknowledging those people who have helped you get you to where you are, because as you said, the take a village. Very few, if any of us, get there by ourselves.
Yes, exactly. There was this one book reviewer who, right when I first released my book, he read my book, and he actually was like, he was such a huge advocate, and he was such a huge cheerleader for my book. I don't know if he's still, I lost touch with him actually like a few years ago, but he was such a huge advocate for my book, and he was huge in terms of just encouraging me and just kind of like, hey, where's this going to be going? I think you could really have a long career. He really kind of helped me kind of think about long term and not just like, okay, I have this book out. He helped me think about what's the long-term nature of this book series and just kind of having a career as an author. And I could never really repay him for how much he kind of really inspired me to get the best quality book I could out there. That was just one of the people. Yeah. I don't know if he's with us anymore, but he was actually I was very grateful for him for that.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up to the end of the show. I'd like to ask if you'll just hang on after we stop recording for the after show. It's just a little discussion.
Sure.
And if Jarvis is here, well, first of all, I want to remind everybody. Obviously, this is on every Friday night, except when I can't be here and someone else can't fill in for me. But remind you, all the people you know about the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show. I want to thank everybody who always supports, the people who show up, the people who chat, the people who pick this up as a podcast. All of that really helps. And I'm actually stalling to see when we can get Jarvis in to say his good night. For those of you who know about what's going on BSFS, we're producing our first 3D animated feature movie, Earth Squadron. A lot of things are going on about that, so check that out on the site. And it looks like Jarvis has checked in. My man, what else do you have to tell the folks tonight?
I'm going to keep it short and sweet. As always, I want to thank everyone for your support. Without you, what we're doing would be useless. We wouldn't be serving our purpose, which is to spread the banner of Black science fiction and move it forward. Also, last week we didn't put out a new character for Earth Squadron, and the reason behind that being I kind of held off. This weekend, I'm not sure if it's Saturday or Sunday, but we're dropping 2 characters at the same time. So that process is moving right along, and I'm just keep it short and sweet. Thank you, William. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and thank you, Charles. I really appreciate it. And
thank you very much, Jarvis.
You sharing is some really good stuff, and I see the comments in the chat room, and everyone's like, "What the knowledge you're dropping is really important." So thank you again for coming on, and make sure to post events and things that you're doing in our events calendar so that other people can support you on it. And
Jarvis, it's my pleasure.
Thank you. And share anything that you're doing on the site. And similarly with other science social media, just come in and say hi to people in the chat room and get to know some of the other people there. Because like you were saying, when you create those relationships, those people become your advocates. And so we advocate each other here on the site and support each other, not just in words, but also financially by buying each other's stuff. So thank you again, and thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop recording now, and we'll probably hang around a few more minutes after the recording stops if there are any other questions. So with that said, thanks, and good night.
Good night, everybody, and thanks again, Charles.
Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure being on the show. 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 It was my